Welcome back to the 38th episode of the Boy Oh Boy Wowie podcast. Today we have another big guest who played 83 AFL games and won a premiership in 1993 for Essendon. Please welcome Rick Olarenshaw. I've said that last name right, mate?
Yeah, close enough, mate. How are you, Bailey? You good?
Yeah, good, thanks. We'll just jump straight into it. How'd you first get involved in footy?
Well, I grew up in a footballing family, really. All my family played football, my dad, my brothers, my uncles. So I guess I was just born into a family that loved their football. So I've had a football in my hand ever since I can remember, probably as a 3-year-old, going down to watch my dad play with Sunshine and watch my brothers play. So football's been my passion ever since I can remember. And even now that I live abroad, football is still probably my number one passion I've got.
Yeah, when did you start to take your footy seriously?
My first season of footy was with Keilor Footy Club in the under-9s. So I think I was about 7 years of age. And I just loved my footy. I couldn't get enough of it. So it probably wasn't until about, 14, 15, I thought about, being an AFL footballer, I guess, where I actually thought I might be good enough to make it. I guess every kid's dream is to be an AFL footballer, but I guess around about that age, I actually thought that I had a chance, that I had the ability and the equipment to make it. So, but I probably didn't take my footy, really seriously until maybe 17, 18, when I guess footy becomes a bit more serious, not just playing with your mates and having a laugh.
Yeah.
I guess I always wanted to, play AFL, but it probably didn't really get serious until late school years, I guess.
Yeah. What was the lead up to the draft like for you back then?
Well, I was lucky in a way that because I grew up in Keilor, which was metropolitan zone, I didn't have to go through the draft.
Yeah.
So back then for me, where I lived in Keilor was part of Essendon zone. So I naturally went down to there and came through the under-19 system and then the reserve grade system. So I didn't have to sort of worry about getting drafted and having to move into state, whatever. I always knew that if I was going to go anywhere, Essendon as part of their zoning. So a lot of the players that I grew up with in that Keilor area, I'd known since I was, the guys that played with at Essendon, especially in that premiership year, Joe Mercedes, Mark McCurry, these guys had come through that Keilor area, and I knew they were, since they were juniors. Not having the draft to worry about was probably a good thing for me.
Yeah, what was it like arriving at Essendon, like your first day on the track?
Mate, scary. It was seriously scary. I was a Bulldog supporter. I actually hated Essendon. I didn't like the players at Essendon. I used to go down to Wind Hill and I'd give them some crap and whatever. But I remember first night walking into Essendon Footy Club. And I was so nervous. I took my brother actually drove me down because I didn't have my license. And I just remember the first guy that we saw when we walked in the club rooms was Paul Salmon, who is just a man mountain. Like he's 6'10", he's got muscles on muscles. And I remember my brother like wincing, like, whoa, like how big's that bloke? And he was the first guy I did a warm-up lap with. I remember he goes, come on, mate, let's go into a warm-up lap. And I remember doing a warm-up lap of Windy Hill with Paul Salmon, and I was so nervous that I couldn't even put a sentence together. He was asking me questions about where I was from and what position I play, and I simply could not put a sentence together. I was so nervous. And I still remember that very first training session. So during my career as an AFL player, I always remembered what my first night was like. So whenever a new player would come to the club, I'd always sort of go out of my way to make them feel comfortable and welcome them, because I knew how intimidating going to a new club was. And I remember when I changed clubs, still get nervous. I remember my first day at Collingwood, I still went to the club like really, really nervous. And again, you walk in and Nathan Buckley's in the room, and it's quite daunting walking to an AFL club. And when you and I remember when I first got to Essendon, I was really skinny, and you go into the weights room, and the guys are doing bench press with the the big weights on the barbell.
Yeah.
And I could lift it. I waited till all the players had left. I took all the weights off the barbell and did the lightest weight you could possibly do because I was too embarrassed to try and do it while all the players were there. So yeah, the first time is pretty daunting, but footy clubs are good. They do really make you feel welcome, and guys get around you. So within a couple of weeks, you've got your own circle of friends, and it was a pretty good journey.
Yeah, when you arrived, was there anyone there who sort of acted as like a mentor to you, or sort of took you under their wing and sort of tried to help you out as much as they could?
Yeah, good question. Early on, I played under 19s. So there was a couple of guys there that you probably wouldn't have heard of that were really good with the younger guys because they've been there for a couple of years. Paul Hills, he played in the Premiership in '93. He was really good in that way. He was a young guy who took the new guys under his wing. But then as you come through the ranks, you develop different relationships with different guys. Mark Harvey was a guy that I knew from my Keeler days because he played with my brother. So I gravitated towards Mark because he was a Keeler boy. And then you got guys like Gary O'Donnell who are just really, really professional the way they go about their football. So you tend to follow what they do. And you look up to sort of those guys that you want to be like. So Gary was great. David Grenville was really good. You probably don't remember David, but he was a premiership player in the '93. He also played the 1990 grand final. He was just a really good guy that you could bounce your feelings off. So yeah, there's a number of guys that you could. I've got a really long list of guys that that I guess were mentors and whatnot. But I guess back then at Essendon we had so many great players and superstars of the game. There was so many resources you could tap into in terms of players.
Yeah, what was your first preseason like for you at Essendon?
My first full preseason at Essendon, good question. Just going back such a long time ago. My first full preseason was back in 1991, over that summer. And I did a bit with the 19s. I did a little bit with the senior group. But it was really, what I found really demanding is that we were all either working full-time or at school full-time. So your training was done around those times. So you'd have to go to the club at 6 a.m. in the morning to do your weight sessions or running sessions. Everyone would go off to uni or work or even high school for some of us. And then you'd have to come back again afterwards at the end of the day. And I remember there was guys like Gary O'Donnell who'd have a nap in their car after work and before football training, just get that hour nap in. And then again, you'd have to do it like a 2-hour, 3-hour session in the evening, get home, have dinner, it was bedtime, and all of a sudden the alarm clock's waking you up to go back to training again. So it was really grueling because you're doing full days of work or school and you've got these 2 solid training sessions that bookended it. So it was really, really demanding and grueling in that regard. At least now the players, I know pre-season loading's probably higher, but at least they're going to work and school like we did. But the pre-seasons are always the most, the things you dreaded the most. Once the footy starts, once the games start, you love it. But those couple of months before Christmas and the couple of months after Christmas are always the thing that you dread the most as a footballer, especially when, like me, I wasn't a great runner. The guys who are great natural runners, they have 2 months off after the season. They drink, they do no training at all, and they come back first day and they win the run. And then the coaches go, "Oh mate, how good have you come back? What condition? Great condition you're in." They all think that there's been smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol and going to nightclub. There's just some guys who are just natural runners, natural athletes. They find pre-season a lot easier than guys like myself who weren't really born with a great tank. We always found pre-season a lot harder.
Yeah. At what point did you think you might debut?
There was a stint in 1992 where I put together a month of reserves footy, which was pretty solid. And I was named emergency in the senior side, sort of 4 weeks in a row. So I felt like I wasn't far away from getting a game. I guess each week I was waiting for a name to get wrapped up by Kevin Sheedy, thinking I might be a chance to make my debut, but I was always named emergency. And there was some of the young players around me were starting to make their debut in 1992. And then just when I felt like I was about to get picked, I got injured and I missed the rest of the season. And I missed the 1992 reserves final. So then I guess my preseason then was all about I want to make my debut round one because I missed out in 92. So I always felt like that by then my debut wasn't far away. And I also felt like I was ready. I'd done 3 years in the 19s in the reserve. So I felt like I was ready to play AFL. I wasn't just throwing in raw. So when I made my debut, it was round 3 in 1993 against Collingwood in front of about 87,000 people. So a pretty huge experience, and so many friends and family went. But I guess at that point I felt like I was ready to go, and 93 ended up being a bit of a fairy tale season really for us.
Yeah, what was your lead up to your debut like? Like, when did you find out that you were going to play?
Well, back then we didn't have mobile phones, so you had to use the house phone. I remember the phone rang one night. It was I think it was a Wednesday night, and Mum answered the phone, and she's like, "Who is it?" Kevin Sheedy. And so she's like, thought it was one of my mates playing a joke, and she said to me, "Rick, there's one of your mates on the phone. He reckons he's Kevin Sheedy, but I think it's one of your mates." So I got on the phone, and he's like, "This is Kevin Sheedy," and like. She's back then is pretty scary character. I was like, "Oh yes, Kevin, what's up?" He's like, "You're making your debut." So he gave me a call, a few days before, and I think we played Collingwood on the Saturday. So it was a pretty long 3 days. You're pretty nervous, and it obviously gets papered on the Friday morning, and you get so many friends and family and whatever ring the house, and it actually makes you more nervous because everyone's calling and whatever. So it's a pretty big thing when you make your debut, and especially in front of 87,000, that's a pretty big one. It is pretty nerve wracking.
Yeah, what was it like to have your whole family there to watch your first game?
That's an awesome feeling, especially when you leave the house. I still lived at home at that point, so leaving the house with your bag and your mum and dad are there. And they're obviously so proud because they've been there with you since you first started playing footy. And your brothers and your grandma still there. I was lucky; I had all 4 grandparents alive at that time, so they all got to see me play. It's a pretty awesome experience. I know all my mates I grew up with all went to the game, and I imagine talking to my dad, right throughout my career, he was always more nervous than I was, because he'd be in the crowd before the game, and there's always that big build up, and he was always really, really nervous. Whereas I guess in the rooms you're warming up like you do as normal. You don't feel the crowd until you run out, and I guess you're in some sort of control as well. You can actually have an impact on the game. It's in your control. Whereas my dad was sitting in the grandstand, and he'd get frustrated when I wasn't getting the footy. He was getting frustrated when I wasn't running the right way, or in the right areas, or I'd miss a target. And it's really hard when your son's in the grandstand and you're watching them play, and it always looks easy from, as you've probably been in the footy games, it always looks easy from the grandstand. Game looks easy. Out there, it's twice as fast, and you're at ground level, so you can't see what someone can see up high. And also, my family have to cop criticism as well when they're sitting in a bay at the MCG, and you got people around them criticising their son, calling him names and saying you're hopeless, Olarenshaw, or whatever. So often, my family and friends got into fights at the footy, defending you because you're getting abused by not only opposition supporters but your own supporters as well. So that's always a pretty, and it's even magnified now with social media. We cop it during the game and that's it. But now you cop it during the game, you get online, you cop it after the game, you cop it the next morning. It'd be really, really tough mentally being an AFL footballer now. That's one part of the game that I think would be really hard to deal with.
Yeah, what was it like running out with the likes of Hurd and Wanganeen?
Well, I didn't get such a buzz out of them because I grew up playing alongside those boys in a way through the under-19s and reserves. I probably got a bigger buzz when Tim Watson made his comeback, and I ran alongside him back in a reserves game in 1993. I didn't really know Tim because he retired as I arrived, and he made a comeback. And I just remember like playing in the reserves against the Bulldogs, and Timmy Watson's warming up in our rooms. He's just making his comeback. That was a bit of a buzz to run out alongside him. But a lot of the other guys I sort of knew for a few years anyway. So it's not, it's not as a buzz as what other people think. But definitely when you run out, like you look at our 93 team and you're running out through the banner, and you got lots of Michael Long and Bomber Thompson. You've got some stars around you. It is pretty wow. It's a pretty good team. And there's a few tough guys in there too, like Sean Dano, that he's up the bat for you. It was a really good team to run out alongside back in 93.
Yeah, what was your lead up to the finals like that year in 93?
Yeah, well, we sort of came from nowhere. We started to see, pretty average, and we gradually crept our way up the ladder until we got to a point where we're almost top of the ladder. And I remember saying to my dad, geez, we could win a premiership here. I might get a premiership medal. That was what it was on my mind. He's like, come on, son, you're getting ahead of yourself, getting a premiership medal. So we're probably a couple of weeks out from the finals. I actually thought we were half a chance to win it. And we did finish the season on top because we had so many guys on the side. Probably people thought we might fall away in the finals. We weren't experienced enough, especially when we lost our first final, that was the first final under lights that the AFL had ever played, and we lost by a couple of points to Carlton. So, yeah, I think a lot of people would have said, we're probably, baby Bombers, they're inexperienced, they'll fall away. But we always had a lot of belief. Going into that final stage, we had a huge amount of belief in our own team and our own game plan and the guys around us. And, so we always felt like we were a really, really good chance to win it. And once we passed Adelaide in that preliminary final, I don't think we ever thought we were a chance to lose.
Yeah, what was it like finishing on top?
I think back now, I think it was sort of, really it was irrelevant. I think it was just like, we've made the finals and we're got to get a double chance. I think it was more about that. Finishing top wasn't that much of a big deal, I guess. It was just more about playing finals, playing at home, not having to travel interstate, because West Coast had obviously won it in 92, so they were a powerhouse team. Crows were a good team, so we didn't have to play them in Adelaide. So it actually worked in our favour finishing top, and gave us a really good chance to go all the way through.
Yeah, what was the lead up to the grand final like for you personally?
It's a pretty big week, mate. You win the prelim, and then all of a sudden there's just so much excitement about the grand final. Everyone's talking about the game. Everyone wants tickets. You're getting calls from people you haven't even heard of, family members that distant cousins that wanted grand final tickets. It's a pretty crazy week. All of a sudden you've got 10,000 people at training. So it does go up a few levels. We try to keep it as normal as we possibly could, but it's really hard to do. And I just remember the crowds at training, and everywhere we went, people wanted to talk about the game. And but then when it got to the actual day of the game, and you arrived at the ground, it just felt like any other game, really. Like being in the change rooms. You don't see all the fanfare outside. You don't see the bands and balloons and planes going over. Once you're in the rooms, it just feels like any other game played.
Yep.
And by the time we get out in the ground, all of that's been cleared. The ground becomes just a normal ground that you played on week to week. But the actual week itself is huge. And then even the following week when you win it, that's even crazier. Everywhere you go around town, everyone wants to get a drink, everyone wants to be a friend. I even remember one night walking from a bar, leaving a bar, and a divvy van pulled up. And I thought it was going to be a strife with the police, but actually gave me a lift to another bar. So you sort of end up with a key to the city for a week or so. It's pretty fun as a young bloke for sure. So yeah, it's I guess it's a little bit of a regret looking back that I only got to play in one grand final and one premiership. And you know, I did have a bit of envy when Essendon went on and played in the 2000 premiership after I'd changed clubs. So yeah, I look back and I wish I had more experiences in grand. I played I think I played 10 finals. So I had a lot of finals experience, but would have liked to play another grand final. That 96 loss to Sydney Swans. When Lockett kicked that point after the siren, that's probably the biggest disappointment when you're so close to playing in another grand final. And I know North were really good that year, but I felt like we could have really, I think we could have been a better opposition to North the following week had it got through. But who knows? But yeah, that's probably the biggest regret is not getting into that grand final in 96.
Yeah, what was it like running out in front of 96,000 people on grand final day?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, we'd done it before. We'd had some big crowds during the year, so we were prepared for it and we were used to it. That was one thing. Like my first game was in front of 87,000. So yeah, running out in front of such a massive crowd is huge. I remember Anzac Day 95, and we had another 95,000. That was probably even a bigger roar. I think the Anzac Day game that year was probably the loudest game I've ever played in terms of crowd noise. So yeah, it's a big. The hard thing is when you get used to playing in front of such big crowds, going back to play in front of smaller crowds is always a big challenge. And I know, speaking to some of the AFL players now, they've had to play in front of no crowds or restricted crowds. They say that they feel the fatigue more. When there's a crowd that's making noise, it gives you adrenaline, and you tend to find that extra gear, and you can dig deeper. Whereas playing in front of no crowds, they tell me that you feel the fatigue more. They actually feel tired quicker. You can't defensively transition as well. You can't dig as deep. So I definitely agree with that, because I know when we played in front of smaller crowds after having some of those really big crowds, your motivation levels aren't quite there, and you probably don't go as hard as what you've done in front of those bigger crowds. So even now it's the same. I play for the Bali Geckos in front of like 10 people over here in Bali, and if you get a bit of a crowd there, all of a sudden you play a bit harder, or you go and play in front of no one over in Jakarta. It's definitely harder to get motivated.
Yeah. What was it like when you guys set up the game in the first quarter of the grand final?
We definitely settled into the game quicker, I felt. Even the opponent I played on, Brett Scholl, who's become a friend of mine, I could just tell he was really nervous. He was a bit fumbly, and I felt like we settled into the game a lot quicker and got a couple of scores on the board, which gave us a bit of control of the game then. Once you get a couple of goals, you definitely feel better within yourself, and you just like to get your hand on the ball. One thing I really liked was get my hands on the ball early in the game, and I guess a lot of our players got a touch early of the footy. So once we did that, we definitely got a jump on Carlton, and then we had control of the game for pretty much the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah, what was it like going into the last quarter with a very big lead?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people probably thought we had the game won. I know I didn't feel that way at all. Even at 3/4 time, I felt like Carlton still had something to throw at us. And it was a pretty warm day, and we'd had a pretty grueling final series. So I know I was feeling the pinch, and I knew a few other players would be feeling the pinch too. So I didn't feel like we were home. And it was probably late in the last quarter where it was almost like relief. Like, I think we've got this one now. Like, I don't think there are any chance of getting back.
Yeah.
So it's more, the first feeling you get is a relief. You don't really get, you get the jubilation when the final siren goes, but a few minutes before that, you more get a relief that we can't lose it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the last 5 minutes was good because I knew we won it, but I was totally spent. I had nothing left in the legs. I couldn't get near the footy. My legs were heavy. I just couldn't wait for that final siren to go. And it's funny. It feels like it happened not that long ago. And when I ever see every year I watch the grand final and I watch players get up and get their premiership medal, it always gives me goosebumps. It's just such a great moment in your life to get up in front of such a big crowd and receive a medal that you've been striving for a lot of your life. So yeah, it's a really amazing feeling. But again, it feels like it didn't happen that long ago. But what is it, 28 years ago now? Long time. It sounds like a long time in years, but in time, it doesn't feel that long ago.
What was it like when that final siren did go?
Yeah, it was huge. It's just you want to hug all your teammates, you want to hug all the staff. You don't know whether to laugh or cry or cheer or hug or what. Like it's a feeling that you can never really replace. I guess when you go through life, it's very hard to get such a massive high. So yeah, it's an amazing feeling. But as I said before, I regret not getting there again and doing it twice.
Yeah, what does winning a grand final do to your group, and how close do you as a group stay connected throughout not just your footy journey, but your whole life?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Nat. You definitely have a kindred spirit, I guess, when you're playing a premiership together. You've always got that connection. So there's players that I've drifted apart from. I don't see much of, but when you do cross paths, you've automatically got that connection. I don't think you never break that. It doesn't matter whether you played in a premiership at AFL level or at local level or a cricket grand final when you're under 12s. I think there's always there's a connection when you do play in a premiership. Unfortunately, with our 93 team, we're not that connected anymore. At our 25-year reunion, we only had 11 players come to the reunion. There's a few players interstate or who could make it, but it was a disappointing number.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to maybe the 30-year reunion and try to get the whole team there again. But again, I'm not sure that's going to happen. But it would be nice to get the whole team together once again, because there has, a lot of guys have drifted apart for whatever reasons, and as you've probably read about a lot of them. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen that team stay closer for sure.
Yeah, what led to the decision to leave Essendon?
Yeah, big one, mate. It's always hard when a player comes to the crossroads, whether it's through lack of opportunity or lacking motivation, or sometimes it's contractual. There's always reasons why players change clubs. And personally for me, I just felt like I needed a change. I wasn't playing in positions I was keen to play in. I felt like there was some young players who were getting sort of pushed past you. I wasn't offered the money I was hoping to get, but that wasn't really my key decision. I think most players move more so for opportunity or just get a new, I guess, fresh impetus to their footy. So for me, that's how I felt. I was a bit stale. I was a bit frustrated. I was out of contract. I just thought moving in clubs might give me the opportunities I was looking for at the time. I look back now and I think, wow, I could have maybe stayed. I could have really gripped my teeth and fought for my spot and, try to, keep my place in the team and play in that 2000 premiership. That's why when I become a player agent after my football career, I always like to persuade my player to stay at their club and not move. I always explored all those avenues first to see, can they train harder? Can they get fitter? Can they change their position? Can they, is there other avenues to look at to keep your spot at your current club and not move? That was the lesson I learned. I felt like I could have probably changed a few things and fought for my spot. I made a decision to leave. Collingwood wasn't my first choice. So I was really keen to go to North Melbourne and play under Dennis Pagan.
Yeah.
And I ended up at Collingwood, which I really enjoyed my time at Collingwood. Combination of factors, I was injured a lot of the time, but at the time, Collingwood probably wasn't in a great place as a club.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, to be honest, I didn't really enjoy my time at Collingwood, and you know, my body did fall apart during those 2 years there. And then seeing Essendon go on and have some success, especially with that 2000 premiership, was a pretty tough time in my life.
Yep.
In that latter part of, was it 98, 99, 2000.
What led to the decision to retire?
Oh, simply my body was falling apart. My body couldn't play AFL anymore. I had some pretty big injuries when I had a few injuries at Essendon, but I was able to get over them. And then, so I did miss a fair bit of footy at Essendon, but my last 2 years there, I was pretty much injury free and my body felt good. Got to Collingwood and I had some pretty big injuries. I had a disc bulge in my back followed by snapping off my hamstring. So it was a pretty easy decision to retire because I just couldn't play. My body just wouldn't let me play. And then Dennis Pagan taught me our retirement, and I went to North Melbourne. I was still only 27 when he taught me our retirement, so he thought I had a bit of footy left in me, even though my body was telling me otherwise. So when I got to North, my body was a bit of a mess, and they tried to put it back together for me, but I only played the one game and tore my other hamstring off.
Yeah.
So again, it was an easy decision to retire because my body just wouldn't let me play on. And by that stage, I'd had 3 years of injury, and I was just mentally shot. I was just tired of footy, and wanted to move on to the next part of my life. That's how I was feeling. You know, when you spend 3 years having to swim or on a bike or on in the medical room, it's not very enjoyable. And the reason we play football is because we love it and we enjoy it. And that's why I'm back playing football again now over here in Bali, because I just love playing. I love the competition. I just love the banter amongst your teammates. At that point, I wasn't getting that. I wasn't playing football for the reason I started back when I was 7. So it was an easy decision to retire, and I have some regrets. So I look back and think I could have done a couple of things differently, but I guess I was lucky enough to play, 12 years in an AFL clubs and playing premiership. So I have to be happy with that.
Yeah. What has life after footy been like for you?
I've had a pretty good run, actually, mate. It's been an interesting journey for me. I retired, as I said, I retired quite young at 28. And then I moved to London for a while, worked in sports management, then came back to Australia to work in sports management, mainly in football and cricket. I did that for about 10 years and then sold my business and moved to Bali around about 10 years ago. And then here in Bali, I got back to playing football again, started some new businesses here and started a family. I've had, I guess, 2 phases. I've had the time living in Melbourne post-football and working in sports management. And then 10 years in my 40s, building a life here in Bali.
Yep. What were the best moments of your career?
Best moment, I think I probably talked about those. Obviously, the premiership was a big moment. But you have all these moments along the way. We talked about them before. That first night at Essendon, when you first walk in, that's a big moment. Getting your first game, getting that call from Kevin Sheedy, playing in the first ever night grand final, the premiership, playing in front of 95,000 Anzac Day. You have all these big moments on field, I guess, but also a lot of moments off field, some great laughs and some great friendships. And there's highlights along the way. There's a lot of lowlights too that mixed in, but there's plenty of highlights along the way. Lowlights, like when you get injured and come back, get injured again. And they're all lowlights that people don't realise how heavy they weigh you down. Moving clubs and trying to get accepted into a new club. So there's a lot of highlights throughout, on and off field, but there's also a lot of lowlights thrown in too. It's not all Hollywood.
Yeah, who are your best teammates across your whole AFL career?
Oh, I wouldn't like to single anyone out. I do catch up with a lot of guys here in Bali as they come through, past and current. The great thing about Bali, we get so many of those footballers coming through. So I do get to spend time with guys throughout the year, and which has been great. I've reconnected with teammates. I've become matey with opposition players. I've got to know a lot of current players because they often come here and train with the Geckos, which is a team I coach here. So yeah, I've stayed pretty matey with a lot of the football community. I wouldn't say I've got a best mate out of football. There's guys that I chat with weekly. There's some guys I might chat with a couple of times a year. But yeah, I've developed some really good friendships out of my football days. Guys I play with, guys I played against, current players, administrators, guys who never played football, but worked around football clubs. So yeah, it's been a big part of my life, and it still is. And the great thing about being based in Bali, well, not right now with the COVID, but we get so many AFL crew coming through, which I'm sure will happen hopefully next year, fingers crossed, but definitely the year after, I'd say.
It's everything I got for you, mate. Thanks heaps once again for coming on.
No worries, mate. Good chatting, mate. I'll have to, next time I'm back in Australia, I'll have to come through Hamilton.
Might not be over yet. 5 seconds to go. He's at a bounce. 13! Can you believe it? He's kicked 13. Go!